Gotta say, we've been eating good when it comes to remakes these days. Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, Final Fantasy VII, Tony Hawk 1 and 2, Destroy All Humans, the Resident Evils, well, one of them at least, and Spongebob Squarepants, Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated. The initial reviews for Rehydrated haven't looked good. It doesn't bring enough changes, stubborn controls show their age, collectibles are too easy or too tedious and aren't rewarding, unfair combat interactions and unforgiving deaths. When the Metacritic scores between professional publications and users have this much of a gap, something's up. Although, there might be another game fresh in everyone's minds that's also thumbing the scales on both ends. Rather than do the usual bit and mock journos for their tastes or inability to play games, there's a bigger issue that should be explored here. What constitutes a good remake of a video game? By what standards should that remake be viewed? Keep both of those questions in mind as we go on a deep dive into Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated. Spongebob Squarepants Battle for Bikini Bottom is a 2003 platformer based on the hit Nickelodeon animated series. It was developed by Heavy Iron Studios, the team who made Family Guy Back to the Multiverse. I played both titles, and I'll tell you right now that, even if I'm only looking at the classic, Bikini Bottom is the outright better game. Purple Lamp Studios released Rehydrated just a few days ago to mixed reception. Is Battle for Bikini Bottom perfect? No, there's some bullshit in that game. I hated how I couldn't change the camera controls. The physics can be super wonky and create some undesirable results. Sliding controls can feel restrictive when it comes to steering a character. SpongeBob's bowling bubble has issues both in the space required between SpongeBob and the target and the fact that SpongeBob's startup animation can move him off the switch needed to expose the button on certain occasions. That fucking ball puzzle in the Mermalair, and that other fucking ball puzzle in SpongeBob's Dream. Some signposting issues with certain collectibles. And yeah, there are encounters where you'll face enemies who can reach you and you can't reach them, and their attacks can knock you off a platform and take away your progress. But these are issues from the original game. What does Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated do as a remake? The first and most obvious thing that it does is overhaul the graphics of the game. For the longest time, all I'd seen of the game were screenshots of what I assumed would be cutscenes, but the in-game models really do look exactly as they've been advertised.
You do that! Don't worry, Squidward! I'll bring back that King Jellyfish jelly for you to rub all over yourself!
Look at this comparison of SpongeBob from Rehydrated and the classic version that's running on Dolphin. SpongeBob's classic model had this persistent issue where his expressions always broke the mesh on his face, and you could see the seams between his cheeks and his open mouth. He looks a little better in the PS2 version, although the colors look washed out. Frame rate's a lot worse in this version, but that might be due to PCSX2. Also, SpongeBob makes some weird fucking faces in this version. That's all gone and Rehydrated. It feels like I'm playing an animated film with a good art direction. It's also really evident when you take a look at the soft shadowing on Patrick. Even Sandy gets some love in close-up shots, where you can see hints of fur texturing on her face. Shame about her persistent RBF though. There's very subtle detail mapping given to all of the clothing in the game. It's not groundbreaking, but it does add some detail to the 3D models that would otherwise look simple and plastic. SpongeBob looks like he's wearing a quality pair of boat shorts. I can see the seam on Squidward's shirt. And look at Mermaid Man's turkey neck. You can tell this game was a labor of love because Purple Lamp went the extra mile to not only texture SpongeBob's ass, but give some bump mapping to that Krusty Krab cake. Look at HD Hans. I can practically see the pores of his skin. I love how the models for the taxi and bus are now properly in frame and don't cut off at the edges. My favorite visual change that Purple Lamp did to the levels is in the Rock Bottom Art Museum. The upper levels have exhibits that show off the character models for the Bikini Bottom inhabitants, as well as Sandy and Patrick. Purple Lamp Studios, the devs behind Rehydrated, could have just called it a day after giving Battle for Bikini Bottom a facelift, but they didn't stop there. They reanimated all of the cutscenes in the game to make them more expressive than in Classic.
SpongeBob, I'm impressed. How did you fight?
Well, there were these robots. I met Sandy, and the lighthouse was...
Okay. Sorry I asked. Here's the golden spatula that I promised you.
Thanks, Mrs. Puff. Now I'll help you guys evacuate.
But SpongeBob, you don't have a driver's license.
Oh, don't I?
No, you don't.
Well, if I don't, then what's this?
A library card.
Oh...
There are a ton of new animations devoted to SpongeBob, Patrick, Sandy, and Plankton's exchanges with the various inhabitants of Bikini Bottom. After a while, you can spot a few canned animations that get reused, but I am impressed all the same that Purple Lamp reshot those cutscenes, because there are some animations that are only ever made for a specific joke.
I gotta say, Bubble Buddy, for a bubble, you really get around.
SpongeBob, the robots are plundering Rock Bottom's museum, but they've broken the roadway leading up there. You'll have to be clever and find another route to get in.
What if I lick all these stamps and mail myself?
Could work, but perhaps being sneaky would be faster.
This library card and these stamps are just flat planes with textures, but the fact that they went the extra mile to mock up these props for blink and you miss it sight gags deserves some praise. There's a subtle change in the victory animations whenever you get a golden spatula. The camera now cuts to face the front of the character, instead of spinning them around to the camera's position. It's less jarring than before, but more importantly, the animations play out much faster and have more pop compared to Classic. Rehydrated has its particle effects that add visual flair to otherwise dull areas, like the caves or Patrick's dream. I swear, this looks like that one V mission in DMC5, where you have to regain all of his familiars in a boss rush. Purple Lamp kept some of the characters' idle animations, but added some extra ones to reference all of the memes that SpongeBob has generated over the years. Some of the textures in the levels also pay homage to those memes. Not only does Rehydrated look good, but it sounds good.
Goo Lagoon, a sun-drenched beach of sludge at the bottom of the sea. But all is not well here on Paradise. Goo Lagoon, a sun-drenched beach of sludge at the bottom of the sea. But all is not well here on Paradise.
I guess Purple Lamp had access to the raw audio files for Battle for Bikini Bottom, because the audio sounds intact. It sounds exactly as I remember in Classic, but now the ambient sound effects are better mixed and rehydrated. Listen to this waterfall in Kelp Forest. Drowns out everything just by standing near it. I have to manually tweak the sound effects to dial that noise down. Listen to Rehydrated. Practically non-existent. I can actually hear myself think now. Although Bikini Bottom features most of the original cast, I gotta give special mention to the voice actor who's standing in for Mr. Krabs and Mermaid Man. He doesn't sound remotely like either voice, but he's trying his best.
Ah, there you are, boy. Someone's broken the sea needle.
That's horrible. The sea needle is the cradle of Crochet Corner.
Yes, it is. But what's more important is that there are tikis and shiny objects just outside the windows.
Mr. Krabs, how can you think of money at a time like this?
Easy. I just clear my mind. Money.
Oh, talk to the Mermalaire computer in the next room. She'll tell you what to do.
I accept this awesome responsibility, Mermaid Man. You won't be disappointed. Shamed maybe, but not disappointed.
To the doctor's office! Away!
So it looks good and sounds good. Does Rehydrated do anything else? Purple Lamp has added some very subtle quality of life improvements to Rehydrated, that you can only really understand if you've played the classic version. SpongeBob, Patrick, and Sandy all had their movesets adjusted in ways that felt like they should have always been able to do these moves. Patrick's gut check now has a shockwave effect for added flourish. Patrick can now do this attack while jumping. It gives off a similar effect as SpongeBob's melee attack, in that it feels like you're propelling Patrick slightly forward when you do it in midair. He now has 2 different ground pounds. If Patrick follows up a single hop with a ground pound, it's a short butt stomp that has a smaller area of effect compared to the double hop ground pound, but it recovers faster. Sandy's gotten quite the overhaul. She still has her karate chop and red hot kick, but now she can lasso enemies while in mid-air, which allows her to cancel her jump into a lasso instead of having to wait to land on the ground to perform the move. Lassoing enemies also feels faster than before. Instead of double jumping and then holding down the third jump to do her glide ability, you can now hold down the second jump and Sandy will go into her glide. You can still do the triple press if you're too used to the classic method. I'm split over whether I like how Purple Lamp changed her grapple move. Instead of tapping the button to lasso a grapple point, you now have to hold down the button, and the lasso will now pull Sandy towards the grapple point before reverting to the usual swinging motion. I played through Battle for Bikini Bottom Classic just before going into Rehydrated, and Sandy's grapple was the most disorienting transition between versions. It doesn't take long to acclimate, but I did have one issue with a specific grapple point that I'll explain later. The targeting reticle is now a circular brushstroke instead of the pair of gloved hands. I like the new reticle, but in Patrick's case, I wish that Purple Lamp implemented a free aim camera with some soft targeting so that I could have more control when it came to throwing objects. The auto-targeting is a lot more finicky in Rehydrated than in Classic. Not surprisingly, SpongeBob has the most significant tweaks to his mechanics. For one, although you can still slightly tilt the left stick to tiptoe, now as long as you hold down L2, SpongeBob will still tiptoe even if you're pressing all the way forward with the left stick. This makes the entirety of Rock Bottom so much easier when dealing with sleepy time robots. I have nowhere else to point this out, but you can now drop into this vent to get to the museum in Rehydrated. SpongeBob's cruiser bubble is the most welcome change, as it's mapped to the directional input of the left stick, instead of the classic's default inverted vertical controls. This change alone was worth the remake. SpongeBob's wall jump is another major improvement to the classic version, which always felt too slow and floaty for the movement. Now, SpongeBob just slams from wall to wall and it's really snappy. This definitely improves the platforming sections in the Flying Dutchman's graveyard, where you have to bounce back and forth on the moving sails. The SpongeBall's controls have been tweaked as well, and it's now really maneuverable compared to the classic version. Also, you can do a little hop now without cancelling out of the SpongeBall form. The bowling bubble still has that same movement issue in Classic, where SpongeBob can walk off a switch, but that really only happens if you hold down the button. Most switches only really need you to tap it to throw out a ball. If and when you get to this part of the ball puzzle, definitely hug this switch when you throw out a bowling bubble. The sliding controls now feel much more maneuverable than in Classic. I always felt that the range of motion when sliding in Classic felt restricted in a way that I don't feel in Rehydrated. There's some collision issues with the Sandman on Flounder Hill and Sand Mountain. Don't do that activity if you're already trying to beat the time trial. Finally, the camera no longer violently whips back to neutral when you release the right stick. This always bothered me when I wanted to look at my surroundings, especially when I was trying to properly time the ball puzzle in the Mermalair. Besides making changes to the player character's mechanics, Purple Lamp also made some improvements to the readability of enemy attacks. Range attacks will now show an overlay where the attack will make contact with the ground, to give players a better idea of where to avoid the shots. To compensate for this advantage, it feels like Purple Lamp adjusted the recovery for enemy attacks. The Tartar robots recover much faster after hits, and I had to back off whenever I landed my first attack, or risk taking a hit at point blank range. In Classic, they would usually do a wind-up animation before attacking, even after they took a hit. This is a subtle but appreciated change.
Sponginator.
Jellyfish now provide better feedback when they're hit. They used to just whiff in Classic. I love how every enemy has their own intro cutscene before you actually get to encounter them. It's like a character action game. Also, check this out. This guy's name's Monsoon.
Are you that stupid? Fear the unseen much, Jack? Magnetic force, Jack! Nature's force! It's kill or be killed, Jack!
I'm gushing over little things, but I do have to admit that not everything translated gracefully in Rehydrated. I mentioned earlier that I had one issue with a particular grapple point, and it was in rock bottom. I kept holding down the lasso button, but the grapple point would fling me over instead of keeping me on the point. I was able to get it to behave when I recorded that jump, but there's a bigger issue that happens earlier in Rehydrated. In Jellyfish Fields, there are balancing platforms that shift based on where you are on the platform. It's not that much of an issue to cross them in Classic, but in Rehydrated, the longest of these platforms had some weird physics going on. I'm trying to double jump off this platform, but it's coming up to my feet too quickly and cancels out my jump. I overcame this bug by hopping along the platform while its highest point was towards the next path, but that is definitely something that I hope Purple Lamp knows about and will address in a patch. That's probably some quirk in Unreal 4, but definitely something that shouldn't pop up in the starting level of the game.
Yeah, these Unreal robots are getting boring.
And as much as I love the new graphics, the punch to some visual gags in Classic is lost in Rehydrated.
Oh, SpongeBob, I'm actually glad you're here. Believe it or not.
I'm glad I'm here too, Mrs. Puff.
The robots have stolen priceless artwork from the museum. If you can return it all to me, I'll reward you with a golden spatula.
Why do you want all that artwork?
Don't ask questions you aren't prepared to handle the answer to.
I prefer how fucked up Mrs. Puff looked in Classic when she delivered this line. Besides that, I don't have any other issues with Rehydrated. That one platform is super wonky, and I'd prefer if there was an option to choose which type of controls are available for Sandy's lasso grapple. So it's Spongebob Squarepants Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated, a good remake. Yes, it does exactly what I expect a remake to do. Present an old game to a new audience with touched up graphics and slight mechanical tweaks. Purple Lamp showed a lot of deference to Heavy Iron, the original developers of Battle for Bikini Bottom, and the player base.
I accept this awesome responsibility, Mermaid Man. You won't be disappointed. Shamed maybe, but not disappointed.
The ending credits are just like in Classic, but Purple Lamp appended the credits to the original game at the end to remind everyone that this was Heavy Iron's game first, and I admire that level of respect. I heard that Purple Lamp had a speedrunner go through the game to make sure they kept the experience intact for the speedrunning community and maintained as many of the exploits that the community had relied upon in Classic. It's cool to hear devs go that extra mile to make sure that their game meets the standards of the player base. I think there's a point of contention when it comes to what constitutes a video game remake versus a remaster. I think some people expect a remake to evoke the same or similar experiences as the original, but the mechanics have to accommodate modern audiences. Although there are remakes that do cater to that market, I don't think every remake needs to be like that. To me, a remake is when a game has been developed from the ground up in a new engine, but its goal is to primarily appeal to the fans of the original version. A remaster is when a game has been largely untouched, besides modernizing the display resolution and sharpening, but not altering, the textures. Metal Wolf Chaos XD is a remaster. That game looks and plays on PC exactly as how it looked and played on the original Xbox. Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated is just as much of a remake as the modern Resident Evils and Final Fantasy VII are. Does it vastly change the experience to the same extent as the Resident Evils or FF7 are? No, not at all in fact. But that's what the fans wanted. We weren't expecting the Mario Odyssey of SpongeBob games. We just wanted the game to be available on modern systems with widescreen support and good graphics. And we got all that and more. I don't agree with every change that Purple Lamp made, but they made more right calls than wrong. I stopped caring about review scores and Metacritic numbers a long time ago, but I'd be dumb to not acknowledge that those numbers do affect, if not dictate, other people's purchases. So, I'll tell you now, if you're a fan of Spongebob Squarepants, Battle for Bikini Bottom, or just a fan of the SpongeBob cartoon in general, or just a fan of platformers, please play Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated. It's a good platformer and a labor of love for both the series and for the original game. If you're new to the game, here are my 2 tips to prevent that frustration that those reviews seem to experience from the game. 1. Get 40 spatulas and open up the 3rd hub before going into rock bottom. You're gonna need that cruiser bubble. 2. Watch a YouTube guide for the ball puzzle in the Merma lair. Shit, I might make one. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching.